Hey everyone, this video is going to walk you through how to draw the twisted ribbon. And so you're familiar with the ribbons for various causes, and that's basically how this ribbon has been twisted and attached to this board as my subject matter. And so we're going to be looking at the edges and how to draw it accurately, and even more importantly, the values. So I have this set up so that you can see both the ribbon and my drawing. So I could start jumping in right away with drawing the ribbon, but I want to make sure that I have a nice light on it so that it's going to make it a little bit easier to identify the highlights and the shadows. And I've got some nice highlights already on here. If I look at this highlight in here, and then on the inside, how it's lighter on the inside and much darker on the outside of the ribbon. And then I even have this nice shadow area in here. So I just am going to use a light to create a stronger cast shadow as well. So when you're setting this up at home, I would think about maybe having it by a window, setting up perhaps a spotlight using a flashlight, or you can do what I'm going to do, which is use my the flashlight on my cell phone. So I've turned it on and I can play with it about trying to figure out like how strong I want that cast shadow to be, how dark I want the shadows and the highlights to be within the ribbon as well. And I think this will work. It may move because I'm just holding it with my left hand. I would strongly suggest that you prop yours up on something, have something else hold it so that you can move freely when you're drawing. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw the ribbon, and I'm going to start with a really light line. So you want to make it big enough in your sketchbook so you have room for the values, all the shading that you're going to do. So I'm starting with this angled line and I'm looking at how much of this curve I see, okay? Then how long is this section and what kind of an angle do I have happening over here? Keeping in mind the whole time that the thickness of the ribbon is consistent, but it won't always be drawn the same thickness because of perspective. I didn't mention, but I'm using an ebony pencil. I want you to use pencil for this first practice drawing so that you're concentrating on the values and shading. And so you can use any pencil. I would really encourage you to use the ebony pencil that you received, but any pencil would do. Okay, so now I'm looking at this curve, and then I'm seeing how this kind of twists there. Now, this is a key point here. What I want you to notice is the line right here. So this edge is the same edge from right here. Okay, so that surface becomes this surface. So I want to look at that when I'm doing my drawing and I say, okay, this should, if I could see through this ribbon, would come right in here. And notice how there's this like little curve here. And then I've got this little, this curve in the ribbon here. And then it ends on this angle. You might notice how here, this area might start looking a little bit thinner, because if I look at how thin this little area is, it appears to get closer together, but I'm only cutting some of that off because of this part right here. Okay, so now on this side, notice this big curve. I'm going to pay attention to that curve in my ribbon. Okay. And then the same thing over here. I'm going to look at how this edge of the ribbon is the same edge as this edge in here. And so I have this line. That comes in here. Now really pay attention to this negative space. You'll know if you're getting your angles and your size, your proportion accurate, if this negative space matches what you see in here. Okay, and then I've got this ribbon. I could continue to draw through, which means I'm drawing over it, even though I don't see the whole thing, just to make sure that I'm drawing it accurate. And then I've got the end of the ribbon, and the rest is cast shadow down here. I want to pay attention to which ribbon is on top, and in this case, this side is. And so where I drew through, I can always go back and erase that, or that'll become part of my shading. Okay, so now from here, I am going to draw real lightly where my cast shadow is. Notice how it comes to the point on mine. Yours will be different, depends on your ribbon, it'll depend on your light source. And again, I could draw through just to make sure, because you'll notice how that continues, right? So it meets, I get this point, and then it gets wider again. Over here, it meets about right here. And again, look at that negative space that it creates. Notice how some of this cast shadow comes all the way down here. Okay, and then my cast shadow lines up almost with that, that ribbon down here. And then down here, it extends right beyond it. It's a little hair thinner right there, but there's going to be my cast shadow. Now, lots of students always ask, should I add the staple? It's up to you. I'll just give a little really light indication, because then that'll change my values later on. All right, so that's just the drawing portion. The values come next. Okay, so now I'm back, and we've drawn our ribbon, our twisted ribbon, paying attention to the edges to make sure that it looks like this is the outside of the ribbon and this is the inside of this particular ribbon, and my cast shadow. Now I moved my light source a little bit from the original drawing, and so I extended my cast shadow over here, and I bumped this over a little bit more, and we'll see that a little more clearly when we do the shading. So what we want to remember is that the only thing that will be left white on the ribbon is our most brightest, lightest highlights. And in this case, it'll be up here where the light is hitting that ribbon a little bit on this inside, and maybe it'll be a little pretty light here, but it will not be white. So I can even do a really light indication of where I want to leave this white up here. And notice that I'm going to address this section up here first. And so I'm going to notice that it's really dark here, and it gets lighter, but it's about a medium value. And then it gets really bright pretty quick. And then it's dark, and actually gets a little bit lighter to the right side. So it appears to be a little bit darker here and get a little bit lighter here. Okay, so I'm going to start here with my pretty dark. And I'm going to let it get lighter as I get to that highlight area. And I want you to notice that so far I'm only making these transitions with the pressure that I'm applying on the pencil. So I haven't blended anything with my finger. Okay. And that's what's really nice about the ebony. You can, just adjusting your pressure, you can get some really nice transition of values. All right, I'm going to go back in and do a little bit, but I'll probably come back here and make that contrast even stronger. All right, what I want you to notice is how it almost appears like this edge here is white because the edge is lighter because my light is hitting it from this direction. So the inside of the ribbon appears darker. And so that's where I'm going to have a little bit of a line of white value. I'm going to go in here and kind of clean up my sketching marks a little bit. Okay. And when I do that in here, I'm going to leave that little bit white just so I can see that highlight that I created up there. And then notice how I have this light area here and within here. See how it gets lighter in there? So I'm adding my value here, and then I'm going to get lighter here. And then on this side, it gets a little bit darker again. All right, now notice what happens when the ribbon crosses over the other one, because this ribbon isn't exactly sheer, but it's still kind of thin, and so I can still see the bottom layer through the top. So this section in here gets a little bit darker. It's not a whole lot darker. I'm just kind of going around where my staple is going to end up being here. So it's just a little bit darker, and then it goes back to my other value again. Okay, so notice so far, there's no outline showing. Okay, so anywhere where I had the outline drawing is now a part of the value. Okay, and even in here, that line, I don't see the line I drew. I created a visual line of white because of the highlight that I have in there. All right, so now when I get to this side, I want you to notice how the outside here is darker than what's on the inside here. Okay, so my light again is coming from this direction, hitting that, and so it's a lot lighter all the way in here. So this is going to be lighter. Okay. And that's where I might go to create that contrast. Maybe I have it a little too light up here, so I can go back. But I already said that this side was lighter than that side, closer to my highlight. So that means if I make this darker, that means I have to go in and make this darker. Okay. All right, so I have it a lot lighter there, and then it gets a little bit darker again here. Now notice how where this ribbon overlaps here, I've got a little bit of a cast shadow under here. So I'm going to go in and make this a little bit darker under there. Okay. And I'm going to go back to my ribbon. This side, notice how I have this little white or lighter edge right here. Again, because my light source is hitting it right there. So I'm going to go really light up to that point to leave that little highlight area, and then fill this in with my medium. All right, so the other thing I could do there, let's go ahead and what if we fill that all in? I can always go back and use my eraser to erase out that highlight. Okay. All right, so now let's look at our cast shadows. Cast shadows is going to be pretty dark. It's darker than most of the ribbon part. So I want to make sure to get that nice and dark, because that strong contrast is what's going to pull this ribbon off the page, where we can see a strong cast shadow on our table. Now, make sure that you pay attention. Your cast shadow might have some different values. Mine are pretty consistent, but depending on where you're getting your light from, it may get lighter or darker in some areas of your cast shadow. See, this is what I love about ebony pencils. They're so rich. They're just really soft. I can get this really nice cast shadow, and I'm just playing with the pressure that I'm applying onto it. All right, then I've got this cast shadow down here, and I will say it looks a little bit lighter than the cast shadow on the top. That's still going to be a nice strong contrast from the ribbon. And on this side, you notice that it's not as strong of a contrast. I'm going to make it a little bit more so just for the sake of the drawing so that the cast shadow pops from my object. Okay. Oops, I've got that little curve there that I missed. All right, so I would go back and clean up some of my sketching lines that went beyond where I ended up shading. Okay. And now this is where I could go back in and I could blend a little bit more. But one of the things I want you to pay attention to in shiny objects is that generally we have nice gradual transitions of values when we're doing forms. But shiny objects, you'll have these really clear lines between your highlights and your shadows. And the smoother, straighter, more abrupt that changes, the shinier the object. Because if it's a rougher material, it absorbs the light a little bit differently. And so then it gets fuzzier or kind of blends a little bit more. So to show that this is a shiny object, we want to have that really clear difference. Okay. And I'm losing my light source because my hand is moving around holding my flashlight. So that's why you want to really try to prop it up. Okay, so this is what let's go back and do the staple. You might notice that it's darker where that is, but notice how there's a little bit of a light on the right side of it. So once I have the staple itself drawn, I could go back in and erase a little bit of that to give it that little bit of a highlight. That just kind of makes it look like the materials being kind of like pulled in, like it's tough material. Okay. All right. So that's what we're trying to do with the ribbon. Make sure that you're paying attention to the subtle changes in values. We should not see a single outline. We see this ribbon because of the value difference between the ribbon and the background. Same as with the real ribbon in the background. There's no lines outlining it. All right, take your time. Pay close attention to lines from the edges and the values. And good luck.